I'm Morgan Harper, 34, and I've built a real estate empire that my family still knows nothing about. When my cousin Amber's wedding invitation arrived, I wasn't surprised to find myself assigned to Table 21, the miscellaneous relatives section hidden in the back corner. What they didn't know was that 6 months ago I had purchased the prestigious Rosewood estate, the exact venue where Amber's perfect day was scheduled. My phone rang displaying Mom on the screen, and I knew the family drama was about to begin. Before I dive into this story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever dealt with family who underestimated you. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how this all unfolds. Growing up in the Harper family meant understanding one crucial rule: appearances matter more than anything else. My parents, Richard and Diane Harper, were pillars of Boston's social scene, attending every charity gala, joining the right country clubs, and making sure our family name commanded respect. Unfortunately, that obsession with image extended to their children, but not equally. From an early age, it was clear my younger sister Brooke fit the Harper mold perfectly. With her natural grace, conventional beauty, and willingness to follow our parents' carefully planned life script, she became the golden child. My cousin Amber, my Aunt Patricia's daughter, rounded out their vision of family perfection. Both girls were groomed to marry well, host impressive dinner parties, and essentially replicate my mother and aunt's lives. Then there was me, the problem child. Not because I got into trouble, but because I asked questions. Why did Dad's business partners always talk around me? Why couldn't I learn about investments instead of table settings? Why was Grandpa's business advice considered not for a young lady's mind? Morgan, a woman's success is measured by her family, not her bank account, my mother would say, whenever I expressed interest in business or finance. By 16, I stopped sharing my aspirations with my parents. They'd made it abundantly clear that my interest in economics and real estate was just a phase I needed to outgrow. The only family member who took me seriously was my grandfather, William Harper. During summers at his lake house while Brooke and Amber practiced tennis and swimming, valuable social skills, according to my mother, Grandpa would invite me into his study. "The others don't see it, Morgan," he'd say, showing me property reports and investment portfolios. "But you've got the Harper business sense, the real one, not just the social climbing." For 3 summers, Grandpa secretly taught me about real estate valuation, market trends, and investment strategies. Our lessons ended abruptly when he passed away during my freshman year of college. At the reading of his will, the family was shocked when he left me $50,000, specifically earmarked for Morgan's future business ventures. My parents and Aunt Patricia were furious. "That money should go toward Brooke's wedding fund," my mother insisted. "She's actually following family traditions. Morgan's just going through a phase with these business ideas." They spent months trying to convince me to redirect the inheritance. When emotional manipulation didn't work, they attempted legal challenges, claiming I wasn't mentally prepared to handle such funds. The courts disagreed. At 22, with my business degree in hand and my grandfather's $50,000, I walked away from family expectations. I rented a tiny apartment, took an entry-level position at a commercial real estate firm, and stopped attending most family functions. When I did show up for mandatory holidays, I was seated at the edges of gatherings, my accomplishments dismissed as cute or temporary. Over 12 years, I built my company, Harper Estates, from that single inheritance. My first investment was a foreclosed duplex that I renovated and flipped for a 40% profit. I leveraged that success into larger properties, eventually specializing in undervalued historic buildings that could be restored and repurposed. My family remained largely unaware of my growing success. To them, I was still just Morgan, who worked in real estate, which they interpreted as a glorified secretary position. When I stopped correcting them, they stopped asking questions. At family events, which became increasingly rare in my calendar, I was consistently seated far from the main family tables, often with distant relatives who barely knew my name. Last Christmas, while scanning local business news, I noticed that the historic Rosewood estate was for sale. The 19th-century mansion, with its 10 acres of manicured gardens, had fallen into disrepair under its previous owners. Seeing its potential, I arranged a viewing that same week. The moment I walked through its grand entrance, I knew this property would be my masterpiece. The venue had hosted Boston's elite for generations, including several Harper family weddings in better days. My grandmother had shown me pictures of her reception in Rosewood's ballroom long before the property had declined. After 3 months of negotiations and another 3 of intensive renovations, I had transformed Rosewood back to its former glory with modern upgrades hidden seamlessly throughout the historic architecture. What I didn't know then was that this business decision would become intricately entangled with my family history in ways I never anticipated. My downtown Boston apartment is a testament to the life I've built for myself. Floor-to-ceiling windows offer panoramic views of the city skyline. Modern artwork from local artists adorns the walls, and the open-concept design reflects my preference for clarity and transparency qualities my family never appreciated. I was reviewing property documents at my kitchen island when the mail arrived. Among the business correspondence and catalogs sat a thick cream envelope with elaborate calligraphy, Amber's wedding invitation. Despite our strained relationship, the Harpers maintained appearances by including me in major family events, though usually as an afterthought. The invitation itself was a masterpiece of excess gold embossed lettering on heavyweight cardstock, announced that Amber Louise Harper would wed Jackson William Montgomery IV, in what promised to be the society event of the season. I nearly set it aside when a handwritten note from Aunt Patricia slipped out. "Morgan, we've assigned you to table 21. I'm sure you'll understand that close family needs to be seated together, and since you rarely attend family functions, this arrangement seemed appropriate. We still expect the standard family contribution to the wedding gift. Your portion comes to $500. Please remit by next month." Table 21. I actually laughed out loud. At Brooke's wedding 3 years earlier, I'd been seated at the equivalent of social Siberia, surrounded by my father's ancient second cousins, who spent the evening confusing me with various other relatives. One elderly gentleman had spent an hour calling me Margot, while telling me about his gallbladder surgery. After 3 months of negotiations and another 3 of intensive renovations, I had transformed Rosewood back to its former glory with modern upgrades hidden seamlessly throughout the historic architecture. What I didn't know then was that this business decision would become intricately entangled with my family history in ways I never anticipated. More out of curiosity than interest, I examined the venue details. The ceremony and reception would be held at the historic Rosewood estate, with a note boasting that Amber had secured Boston's most exclusive and newly renovated heritage venue. They spent months trying to convince me to redirect the inheritance. When emotional manipulation didn't work, they attempted legal challenges, claiming I wasn't mentally prepared to handle such funds. The courts disagreed. As I contemplated my next move, my phone lit up with my mother's name. Diane Harper never called me except to criticize or request something, so I braced myself before answering. "Morgan, did you receive Amber's invitation?" "No, hello, no, how are you?" Typical. "Yes, just now actually." "Good. Patricia has put together the family wedding gift registry. You're expected to contribute, of course. As a Harper, certain obligations." I saw the note. I interrupted, a habit my mother detested. Table 21 and a $500 contribution. "Don't use that tone with me," she snapped. "Your seating assignment is perfectly appropriate given your limited involvement in family matters. Amber has invited her close friends and supportive relatives to the premium tables." I glanced at the Rosewood brochure I'd personally approved just months ago. "The venue looks impressive," I offered, curious how she'd respond. "It's the most exclusive property in Massachusetts," she said with undisguised pride. "Patricia and Robert had to pull significant strings to secure it. The owner is apparently quite selective about events." The irony was delicious, but I wasn't ready to reveal my hand. "I'm sure it will be beautiful. We expect you'll dress appropriately," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "And please do something with your hair. Those business styles you prefer aren't suitable for family photographs." After extracting promises about my appearance and contribution, she ended the call without asking a single question about my life or work. I looked again at the invitation, tracing my finger over the embossed Rosewood logo I had designed. A plan began forming in my mind. I would attend this wedding not just as the distant cousin relegated to table 21, but as the owner watching to see how my family would react when they discovered the truth. Not out of malice, but because perhaps finally they would be forced to see me for who I had become, not who they had decided I was. I set the invitation down, emotions swirling between hurt, anger, and an unexpected sense of poetic justice. Part of me wanted to call immediately and reveal the coincidence, but something held me back. Perhaps it was years of conditioning to expect dismissal from my family. Or maybe it was the businesswoman in me, recognizing a unique opportunity, not for revenge, but for a reckoning. The dinner was held at my parents' Beacon Hill home, a place I hadn't visited in nearly a year. Nothing had changed. The same intimidating formal dining room with its antique mahogany table. The same family portraits chronicling generations of Harper success. None featuring my accomplishments, and the same cool reception from relatives. "Morgan, you actually made it, my sister," Brooke said with exaggerated surprise as I handed my coat to the housekeeper. "We had a bet going on whether you'd cancel last minute." Her perfect smile didn't reach her eyes. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, matching her false warmth. At 31, Brooke had fulfilled the Harper destiny by marrying a surgeon from a good family, and was currently decorating their Brookline mansion while planning the requisite 2.5 children. Amber swept into the foyer in a designer dress that probably cost more than my first car. "Morgan, almost didn't recognize you without a business suit." She air-kissed near my cheeks. "Thanks for coming. Jackson's parents are here, so try not to bring up any of your unusual ideas about women in business. They're very traditional." Before I could respond, Aunt Patricia appeared, eyeing my simple black cocktail dress with barely concealed disapproval. "You could have made more effort, Morgan. This is a celebration, not a board meeting." She turned to Amber. "Darling, the Montgomerys are asking about your honeymoon plans." I made my way to the dining room where my Uncle Robert was holding court with Jackson's father. "Real estate's a tough business," he was saying. "My niece Morgan thinks she's in that field, but mostly handles paperwork for the actual brokers, right, Morgan?" "Something like that," I answered, having learned years ago that correcting family misconceptions was pointless. "How's the insurance business, Uncle Robert?" I knew his firm had been struggling after losing several major clients. He reddened slightly. "Expanding, actually. Just brought on several new accounts." My father joined us, clapping a hand on Robert's shoulder. "Robert's being modest. He's practically cornered the market on corporate coverage in Boston." I sipped my wine, noting how different reality was from the Harper family narrative. My research into Rosewood's client history had revealed that Robert's firm had been dropped by 3 major corporations in the past year alone. Dinner was the usual performance of Harper family excellence. Amber's wedding plans dominated the conversation: the designer dress, the 5-tier cake, the string quartet flown in from New York. I noticed Jackson, a quiet, intelligent-seeming man, occasionally looking uncomfortable at the extravagance. And the Rosewood Patricia gushed. "We were so fortunate to secure it. The renovations are spectacular." "Yes," my mother added, "they only accept the most elite events now. The new owner is apparently very selective." "Have you met the owner?" I asked innocently. "Not personally," Patricia admitted. "Our event coordinator handles everything. Apparently the owner is some reclusive business type who bought it as an investment." I nodded, suppressing a smile. My company operated under Harper Estates LLC, and I'd purposely kept a low profile during the acquisition. Only my management team at Rosewood knew my identity. As dessert was served, I overheard Amber whispering to my mother in the hallway. "Do we really have to have Morgan at the head table's photos? She always looks so corporate. And she'll probably talk to the Montgomerys about interest rates or something equally boring." "Don't worry," my mother replied, not bothering to lower her voice. "We've arranged for her to be called away during the main photography session. You know how she is, always has some work emergency. It's why she's still single. No man wants to compete with spreadsheets for attention." I froze, the familiar sting of exclusion washing over me. But what came next hurt far more. My father joined us, clapping a hand on Robert's shoulder. "Robert's being modest. He's practically cornered the market on corporate coverage in Boston." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. They were telling people I had mental problems to explain away my independence and success. I must have made a noise because both women turned to find me standing there. Amber had the grace to look embarrassed, but my mother merely raised an eyebrow. Eavesdropping isn't becoming, Morgan. Neither is lying about your daughter's mental health to cover your own discomfort with her success, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Don't be dramatic, my mother sighed. We're simply concerned about your fixations. My fixations built a multi-million-dollar company, I said quietly. There you go again with the exaggerations, she said dismissively. This is exactly what concerns us. Something snapped inside me. Years of diminishment and dismissal crystallized into clarity. My company, Harper Estates, currently manages over $75 million in property assets. I said loud enough for nearby conversations to pause. I employ 27 people and have a waiting list of clients. That's not a fixation or an exaggeration, it's a fact you could verify if you'd ever bothered to take an interest in my actual life instead of the convenient fiction you've created. The dining room fell silent. My father stood up. Morgan, that's enough. You're causing a scene at Amber's celebration. I'm simply correcting misinformation, I replied. Something this family seems allergic to. This is why we worry about you, my mother hissed. These outbursts, these fantasies about your importance. They're not fantasies, I interrupted. You need to apologize, my father demanded. Your jealousy of Amber's happiness is embarrassing us all. I looked around the table at the uncomfortable faces, at Jackson's confusion, at Amber's embarrassment, at my sister's averted eyes. I'm not apologizing for telling the truth, I said finally. But I am leaving. As I collected my coat, my cousin Ryan, the only Harper who occasionally checked in on my life, followed me to the door. They're talking about rescinding your invitation, he warned in a low voice. Aunt Patricia thinks you'll make a scene at the wedding. I smiled, despite everything. Tell them not to worry. I'll definitely be at the wedding. What I didn't tell him was that I would be there regardless of any invitation. After all, without the venue owner's presence, there wouldn't be a wedding at all. 3 days after the disastrous family dinner, I arrived at Rosewood Estate for my monthly management meeting. The estate looked magnificent in the morning light, its restored limestone facade gleaming and the heritage gardens beginning their spring bloom. This project had been my most ambitious renovation. And looking at it now, my most successful. Cameron Wells, the venue manager I'd personally hired, met me in the grand foyer. With 15 years of experience managing elite properties, Cameron had been a crucial hire and his professionalism had helped establish Rosewood's renewed reputation. Morning, Miss Harper, he greeted me. I've prepared the event calendar review and staff reports as requested. We settled in my private office overlooking the rose garden. Originally the estate's library, I'd preserved its 19th-century mahogany paneling while adding modern amenities discreetly integrated into the historic architecture. Let's start with the Montgomery Harper wedding, I suggested, curious about Amber's interactions with my staff. Cameron's professional demeanor slipped slightly. Ah yes. That event has been challenging. He opened a detailed file containing all correspondence with Amber and her wedding planner. As I reviewed the documents, a disturbing pattern emerged. Amber had made numerous demands for free upgrades, citing her family's social prominence as justification. More concerning were reports from staff about her dismissive and occasionally hostile treatment. Last week she reduced our florist consultant to tears, Cameron noted. When I intervened, she threatened to have me fired, claiming she personally knew the owner. I raised an eyebrow. Interesting claim. There's more, he continued, clearly relieved to finally report these issues to someone who could address them. Your Aunt Patricia has made several references to your connection to the event. My connection. Cameron handed me an email that made my blood boil. Patricia had written to our events coordinator, my niece Morgan Harper, has assured us that as a professional courtesy, several premium services will be provided at no additional cost. While she's just in middle management at some real estate office, she claims to have connections with Rosewood's ownership. The blatant lie was bad enough, but using my name to extract free services crossed a line. I checked the contract and discovered that several premium additions had indeed been provided without proper billing based on these misrepresentations. They've also been difficult about the venue rules, Cameron added. They've asked to bring in outside alcohol against our licensing regulations, attempted to rearrange historic fixtures that are explicitly protected in the contract, and have repeatedly exceeded their allotted planning visit times. I rubbed my temples. Has the final payment been received? That's another issue. They're 2 weeks past the deadline for the final balance. We've sent 3 reminders. And their response: your Uncle Robert assured our accounting department that the wire transfer is being processed, but nothing has arrived. The pieces fell into place. Robert's business difficulties, the family's excessive wedding plans, the attempt to extract free services, they were overextended, and trying to use my name to cover the shortfall. Cameron, I want all staff interactions with the Harper Montgomery wedding party documented in detail. Record every phone call, save every email, and have staff write reports after in-person meetings. Cite our client conduct policies if they become abusive. He nodded, looking relieved. And regarding the unpaid balance, send a formal notice that we'll need to release their date if payment isn't received within 5 days. It's standard policy. As we continued reviewing other events, the office phone rang. Cameron answered, his expression growing concerned. It's your cousin Amber and your aunt. They're here for an unscheduled visit to measure the grand ballroom again. This was a complication. While I'd planned to reveal my ownership eventually, I wanted it to be on my terms. I'll use the private exit, I decided. Continue with standard protocols and remember, document everything. I slipped out through my office's private door just as I heard Amber's voice echoing in the main hall. From a secluded alcove, I watched my aunt and cousin sweep into the venue as if they owned it. The chairs need to be further apart during the ceremony, Amber was saying to a staff member. I don't care what the fire code says, my dress requires more space. Miss Montgomery, we're required by law to, the staff member began. It's future Mrs. Montgomery Harper, Amber corrected sharply. And I'm not interested in excuses. Make it happen. Patricia was examining the grand staircase. These floral arrangements won't do. We need something more impressive. The sample photos showed much larger displays. Those were for a different package level, ma'am, Cameron explained patiently. The package you've selected includes standard arrangements. Well, we expect the premium arrangements, Patricia said dismissively. Morgan assured us she could arrange upgrades. I'm not familiar with any approved upgrades, Cameron replied carefully. All changes need to be documented in the contract and paid for accordingly. Patricia's expression hardened. I don't think you understand who we are. The Harpers are one of Boston's oldest families. This venue is lucky to host us. I had to bite my tongue to prevent myself from responding. This venue had hosted presidents and diplomats over its storied history. The Harper family name carried no special weight here. As they moved toward the ballroom, I heard Amber's critical assessment. Patricia's expression hardened. I don't think you understand who we are. The Harpers are one of Boston's oldest families. This venue is lucky to host us. I smiled to myself, thinking of the 100-hour weeks I'd put in personally supervising every detail of the restoration, the historical experts I'd consulted, and the premium materials I'd insisted on throughout the tense project. Rosewood had been a labor of love as much as a business investment. As I slipped out a side entrance, I made a decision. I would allow the wedding to proceed as planned, assuming they paid their balance, but I would no longer remain silent about my accomplishments or accept my family's dismissive treatment. It was time for the Harpers to see me as I truly was, not as they had decided I should be. A week before the wedding, my phone buzzed with a text from Brooke. For your information, your invitation to the rehearsal dinner has been rescinded. After your behavior at family dinner, Amber thinks your presence would disrupt the event's harmony. Mom agrees. I stared at the message unsurprised, yet still stung by the exclusion. Before I could respond, a second text arrived. Also, please coordinate with Aunt Patricia about your gift contribution. You still need to pay your share even if you're not seated with family. The assumption that I would still financially contribute while being publicly excluded was typical Harper family logic. I set my phone aside without replying and returned to reviewing Rosewood's event schedule. Later that evening, I was scrolling through social media when I saw Amber had posted photos from her bridal shower, an event I hadn't been invited to. The caption read, "Surrounded by everyone who truly matters. Number bridal bliss. Number family love." In the comments, I noticed a reply from my mother to someone asking about the other Harper daughter. Morgan had a schedule conflict with work as usual. Some people just have different priorities than family. The lie was so automatic, so casual, they hadn't even bothered to exclude me honestly. As I continued scrolling through the wedding hashtag, a photo of the reception seating chart appeared. Table 21, where I had been assigned, now had different names listed. My seat had been given away without even the courtesy of notification. My phone buzzed with a notification from our family group chat, which I was rarely active in but remained part of for occasional important announcements. Somehow they had forgotten to remove me before discussing my disinvitation. Aunt Patricia. Is it finalized that Morgan won't attend the wedding? Mother, yes, we've reassigned her seat. After that ridiculous scene she caused claiming to be some business tycoon, Amber doesn't want that energy at her special day. Uncle Robert, probably for the best. Her odd behavior has been concerning lately. These grandiose delusions about her success. Father, she'll likely be relieved. These family events clearly make her uncomfortable. My cousin Ryan sent me a private message minutes later. I'm guessing you saw the group chat. They've been talking like this for weeks. Also, Uncle Robert told everyone you tried to get a loan from him last year and were rejected. Said that's why you made up stories about your company at dinner. I know it's bull, but thought you should know what they're saying. The betrayal cut deep. Not just the exclusion or the lies, but the deliberate effort to rewrite who I was to fit their narrative. They would rather invent stories about mental instability than acknowledge my achievements didn't align with their narrow definition of female success. I called Dr. Winters, the therapist I'd been seeing since breaking away from my family years ago. She had helped me establish boundaries without completely severing ties. A balance I constantly struggled to maintain. They've disinvited me from the wedding, I explained after recounting the events. Part of me is relieved, but another part wants to show up as the venue owner and force them to confront their misconceptions. What would that accomplish? She asked, her voice neutral. Honestly, satisfaction. Vindication. Maybe finally some recognition of who I actually am instead of who they've decided I am. And if that recognition doesn't come? If they find ways to dismiss this achievement too? It was a fair question. For years, my family had demonstrated an impressive ability to ignore any evidence that contradicted their chosen narrative. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm tired of hiding my success to make them comfortable. I'm tired of being the family member they tolerate, rather than celebrate. After our session, I made a decision. I would attend the wedding not as Morgan Harper, unwanted family member, but as Morgan Harper, owner of Rosewood Estate. It wouldn't be about revenge, but about standing in my truth and refusing to be diminished any longer. They've disinvited me from the wedding, I explained after recounting the events. Part of me is relieved, but another part wants to show up as the venue owner and force them to confront their misconceptions. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm tired of hiding my success to make them comfortable. I'm tired of being the family member they tolerate, rather than celebrate. Instead, I drafted a formal notice, citing the contract violations and the unpaid balance, making it clear that while I was willing to proceed with the event, all terms would now be strictly enforced and all outstanding amounts must be paid. Immediately, I instructed Cameron to deliver the notice to Uncle Robert personally, without revealing my connection to the venue. The ethical dilemma weighed on me. Was I using my position inappropriately in a personal matter? But the alternative seemed worse, continuing to allow my family to mistreat my staff and misrepresent my involvement while excluding me from an ex paso event happening in my own building. I reminded myself that I wasn't becoming like my family. I wasn't manipulating or lying, I was simply refusing to participate in the fiction they had created. For once, the truth would need to be acknowledged whether they wanted to see it or not. The morning of Amber's wedding dawned with perfect weather, clear skies, mild temperature, a gentle breeze that would keep guests comfortable without disturbing elaborate hairstyles or decorations. From my office window at Rosewood, I could see the garden staff making final adjustments to the ceremony space, placing white garden chairs in precise rows, and arranging floral displays that complemented the estate's historic character. I had arrived early before any of the wedding party to prepare for what would inevitably be a complicated day. Cameron joined me looking slightly apprehensive. "The florist just called," he reported. "They're at the service entrance but security won't let them in." Apparently, the wedding planner changed the delivery time without clearing it through our system. I checked the schedule. "They're 2 hours early. The security team is following protocol." Yes, but Cameron was interrupted by his phone ringing. He answered, wincing slightly. "Yes, Miss Montgomery. I understand it's your wedding day." "Yes, but the contract specifically states." "I see. I'll see what I can do." He ended the call with a sigh. "Amber is on her way and extremely upset about the flowers. She's threatening to post negative reviews about Rosewood before the wedding even happens." "Let's solve the immediate problem," I suggested. "Authorize the early delivery and have the team ready to receive them. Document the schedule violation in our records." While Cameron arranged this, I retreated to my office to prepare mentally for the confrontation that was now inevitable. I had hoped to reveal my ownership in a controlled way, but circumstances were rapidly removing that option. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Heads up, Amber is freaking out about some flower crisis. Aunt Patricia is saying the venue staff is incompetent. They're all on their way there now." 20 minutes later, the relative quiet of the morning was shattered by Amber's arrival. Even from my office, I could hear her raised voice in the main hall. "This is unacceptable. It's my wedding day. Where is the manager? Where is anyone with actual authority?" I took a deep breath and made my decision. It was time. I straightened my tailored suit, checked my appearance in the small office mirror, and headed toward the commotion. The scene in the grand foyer was chaotic. Amber, still in casual clothes but with her hair in elaborate curlers, was gesturing dramatically while a harried wedding planner tried to calm her. Aunt Patricia was lecturing a stoic Cameron about professional standards, while Uncle Robert stood slightly apart, looking uncomfortable and checking his watch repeatedly. Several bridesmaids hovered nearby smartphones ready to document the drama. "The florist situation is being resolved," Cameron was saying calmly. "They arrived outside their contracted time, but we're accommodating the early delivery." "That's not good enough," Amber cried. "This is supposed to be the most important day of my life, and everything is already going wrong. I want to speak to the owner." "I can help with that," I said, stepping into the room. The collective shock on my family's faces would have been comical under different circumstances. Amber's mouth actually fell open. Aunt Patricia froze mid-sentence. Uncle Robert suddenly found the marble floor fascinating. Morgan Amber finally managed. "What are you doing here? You weren't invited." "Actually, I was," I corrected her. "Then I was uninvited. But I'm not here as your cousin." "What are you talking about?" Aunt Patricia demanded, recovering her composure. "This is a private event. You need to leave immediately before you cause another scene." I turned to Cameron. "Mr. Wells, would you please inform the Harper family of my position here?" Cameron straightened professionally. "Miss Harper is the owner and CEO of Harper Estates LLC, which acquired and restored Rosewood Estate last year. All operational decisions ultimately require her approval." The silence that followed was deafening. Amber's expression cycled rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and horror as the implications sank in. I turned to Cameron. "Mr. Wells, would you please inform the Harper family of my position here?" I retrieved a folder from Cameron and handed Aunt Patricia the property deed and company registration documents. "Harper Estates has owned this property for approximately 11 months. We completed the restoration 6 months ago and began accepting event bookings shortly after." The silence that followed was deafening. Amber's expression cycled rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and horror as the implications sank in. This blatant lie, attempting to claim some connection to my success now that it was undeniable, sparked a flash of anger that I quickly controlled. "That would have been difficult considering you've never invested in any of my properties, Uncle Robert. In fact, you've repeatedly dismissed my career as playing at business." Uncle Robert stepped forward, a calculating look replacing his initial shock. "Well, this is surprising news, Morgan. You should have told the family about this business venture. Perhaps we could have helped. In fact, I provided some financing for a similar project last year." I could have advised you. My grandfather left me the seed money that started my company, I interrupted. He believed in me when no one else in this family did. He reddened but pressed on. Family businesses should stay connected. Your grandfather would have wanted. Amber, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly burst into tears. This is sabotage. You waited until my wedding day to reveal this just to ruin everything. You've always been jealous of me. We need to cancel, Amber sobbed to her mother. I can't get married here now. Everyone will be talking about Morgan instead of me. Absolutely not, Patricia snapped. Do you know how much we've already spent? How many people are arriving within hours? This is just another of Morgan's attention-seeking stunts. I maintained my professional demeanor despite the insult. This is not a stunt, Aunt Patricia. This is my business, the one you've all chosen to ignore or diminish for years. And while I have every legal right to cancel this event, due to contract violations, and the still unpaid final balance, I have no intention of doing so. Contract violations, Robert interrupted, looking alarmed. What are you talking about? Cameron handed him a folder. These are the documented instances where the terms of the contract were not fulfilled, including payment delays, unauthorized demands, and staff harassment. As Robert flipped through the pages, his expression grew increasingly concerned. I knew what he was seeing, not just violations that could justify cancellation, but evidence of how they had treated my employees. I don't care about any of this, Amber cried. This is my day. Morgan has to leave. She can't be here ruining everything with her business talk. Amber, I said quietly, this is my building. I'm not going anywhere. The wedding planner, who had been watching this family drama unfold with professional detachment, finally stepped in. Perhaps we should focus on solutions. The guests will be arriving in 3 hours. The solution is simple, I said. The wedding proceeds as planned. My staff will continue to provide the excellent service Rosewood is known for. The only difference is that now you know who signs their paychecks. And the contract violations, Robert asked tensely. The final balance must be paid immediately. As for the rest, consider today a clean slate. But my staff will be treated with respect from this moment forward. Patricia pulled Robert aside and they engaged in intense whispered conversation while Amber continued to sob dramatically. After a moment, Robert approached me. We'll pay the balance now, he said, stiffly pulling out his phone to initiate the transfer. But this deception was unnecessary, Morgan. If you had simply told us about your hobby, we could have avoided this unpleasantness. His continued diminishment of my achievement, now referring to my multi-million-dollar company as a hobby, confirmed that nothing had really changed. They still couldn't see me clearly even when the evidence was literally all around them. The payment has been sent, Robert confirmed after completing the transaction on his phone. Thank you, I acknowledged. Now we have a wedding to prepare for. My team will handle everything according to the contract, exactly as agreed upon, no more, no less. Amber, finally recognizing that cancellation wasn't an option, wiped her tears and fixed me with a cold stare. You will stay out of sight during my wedding. I don't want to see you or hear from you. As far as my guests are concerned, you're just the help. Before I could respond, an unexpected voice cut through the tension. Actually, I'd like Morgan to be present at our wedding. We all turned to see Jackson, Amber's fiancé, standing in the entrance. Tall and composed in contrast to the chaos before him, he approached our group with calm determination. Jackson, Amber gasped. You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony, it's bad luck. He smiled slightly. I think we've had our share of dramatic moments for today. He turned to me and extended his hand. Morgan, we haven't been properly introduced. I'm Jackson Montgomery. I shook his hand, surprised by this unexpected ally. From what I understand, he continued, you've built an impressive business and restored this beautiful property despite significant challenges. As someone who had to work my way up in my family's company rather than having it handed to me, I respect that immensely. Amber looked horrified. Jackson, whose side are you on? I wasn't aware there were sides, he replied evenly. I thought this was our wedding day, not a battlefield. He addressed me directly. I apologize for any disrespect you've experienced. Your achievement deserves recognition, not dismissal. His sincere acknowledgement, the first from anyone connected to my family, momentarily left me speechless. "Thank you," I finally managed. "Now," Jackson said, taking control of the situation, "I suggest we all focus on the celebration ahead. Morgan, I hope you'll reconsider attending as a guest as well as the venue owner. I'd like the opportunity to hear about your restoration process sometime." With that simple intervention, the dynamic shifted. Patricia and Robert looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Amber appeared conflicted, torn between her anger and her desire to please her fiancé. As they dispersed to continue wedding preparations, Amber and her bridesmaids to the bridal suite, Robert to handle the remaining payment, Patricia to supervise the decorations, I found myself standing alone with Cameron in the grand foyer. "Well," he said with professional understatement, "that was eventful." I smiled despite everything. Just another day at Rosewood. As I returned to my office to give the wedding party space, I realized that while my family might never truly see me for the first time, I was completely comfortable with who I was with or without their approval. By noon, Rosewood was transformed into a wedding wonderland. White roses and cascading orchids adorned every archway, crystal chandeliers sparkled throughout the ballroom, and the garden ceremony space looked like something from a fairy tale. Despite the morning's drama, my staff had executed everything flawlessly. I had retreated to my office, monitoring the event through security cameras and updates from Cameron. The ceremony was scheduled to begin in an hour, and guests were already arriving, admiring the venue as they were escorted to their seats. A knock at my office door surprised me. I opened it to find Jackson standing there now, fully dressed in his wedding tuxedo. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said politely. "But I wanted to speak with you before everything begins." I invited him in, curious about this man who seemed so different from the type of spouse I'd expected Amber to choose. "Your family is in crisis mode," he said without preamble. "They're currently holding an emergency meeting in the East Wing parlor, trying to figure out how to handle, well, you." I couldn't help but smile. "Let me guess, they're developing a story to explain my presence that doesn't acknowledge my ownership of Rosewood." He nodded. "Something about you working here as an event assistant. Robert is suggesting, telling people you exaggerated your role out of jealousy." The predictability of their response was almost comforting in its familiarity. "And how do you feel about marrying into this family drama?" I asked. Jackson considered the question seriously. "I love Amber, but I've always been concerned about the family dynamics. The constant performance, the obsession with appearances." He shook his head. "In my family, achievement is valued over image. Seeing how they've treated you, a successful entrepreneur who's created something remarkable, confirms my concerns." His candor was refreshing. "Thank you for that. But don't let our family issues cloud your day." "Actually, I have a request," he said. "Would you join us, not hiding in your office, but present at the wedding? It would mean a lot to me to have someone genuine there." His request touched me unexpectedly. "Even if it upsets Amber. Amber and I need to start our marriage with honesty, not performances," he said firmly. "And the truth is, you deserve recognition, not erasure." After Jackson left, I considered his request. Attending the wedding as a guest rather than hiding in my office would force a confrontation I'd avoided for years. Was I ready for that? My reflection was interrupted by a commotion outside. Through my window, I could see Uncle Robert gesturing angrily while speaking to Cameron. I sighed and headed out to intervene. "Completely unacceptable. We paid for premium service," Robert was saying as I approached. "What seems to be the problem?" I asked calmly. Robert turned, his expression souring when he saw me. "Your staff is refusing to make last-minute changes to the ceremony layout. As a family member, you should be accommodating us." As the venue owner, I corrected, "I enforce our policies equally for all clients." The ceremony layout was finalized in the contract. Changes now would delay the start time. "This is exactly why women shouldn't run businesses," he muttered loud enough for me to hear. "Too rigid, too emotional." "Excuse me," I said, my professional composure momentarily slipping. "Robert, that's enough." My father had approached without me noticing. He looked uncomfortable but determined. "We need to talk, Morgan. All of us. Now." Minutes later, I found myself in the East Wing parlor, surrounded by key family members. My parents, Robert and Patricia Brooke, and a red-eyed Amber, who was somehow managing to look both furious and perfectly made up simultaneously. "This has gone far enough," my father began. "You've made your point, Morgan." "What point would that be?" I asked. "This performance," Patricia interjected, pretending to own Rosewood. "We've indulged your need for attention, but Amber's wedding day is not the time for your theatrical stunts." Minutes later, I found myself in the East Wing parlor, surrounded by key family members. My parents, Robert and Patricia Brooke, and a red-eyed Amber, who was somehow managing to look both furious and perfectly made up simultaneously. "What we believe," my mother said carefully, "is that you may have confused your role here. Perhaps you're in management or have some minor investment." I pulled out my phone and pulled up banking records. "This is the purchase transfer for Rosewood. 8 figures. Here's the deed recording. Here are the renovation expenses. Here's the business registration for Harper Estates LLC, my company, which I built from Grandpa's inheritance that you all tried to take from me." They exchanged glances, clearly unsettled by the evidence but still searching for ways to dismiss it. "Even if that's true," Robert said, "using your position to disrupt Amber's wedding is spiteful. You've always been jealous of Amber and Brooke's social success." "I have a company valued at over $80 million," I interrupted. "Why would I be jealous of their social calendars?" The room fell silent at this revelation. My father was the first to recover. "If you've been so successful, why keep it secret from your family? Why not share your achievements?" The question, asked with genuine confusion rather than his usual dismissiveness, caught me off guard. "Because you never asked," I said simply. "Because every time I mentioned my business, you changed the subject to Brooke's children or Amber's engagement or some other topic you deemed more appropriate for a woman to discuss. Because you told people I had mental problems rather than accept I might succeed outside your narrow definition of female achievement." My mother paled at this last accusation. "We never." "You told Amber's in-laws I had episodes of grandiose thinking." "I heard you, Mom. At the family dinner." She couldn't meet my eyes. The silence stretched uncomfortably until my sister Brooke suddenly spoke up. "I knew." All heads turned to her. "What do you mean you knew?" Patricia demanded. Brooke looked directly at me. "I knew about Morgan's company. About her success. I've followed Harper Estates online for years." This was perhaps the most surprising revelation of the day. "You never said anything I said." She gave a small, sad smile. "Would you have believed I was genuinely interested after how I've treated you?" She turned to our parents. "I was jealous of Morgan. She built something for herself while I was following the script you wrote for me. She has freedom, independence, respect in her field. I have a perfect image and a life I'm not sure I even wanted." The raw honesty from my typically perfect sister stunned the room into silence. "Brooke, what are you saying?" my mother finally asked, looking genuinely alarmed. "I'm saying we've all been unfair to Morgan. We've dismissed her because her choices made us question our own." She looked at me. "I'm sorry, Morgan. Truly." Her unexpected apology created a crack in the family's unified front. My father cleared his throat. "If what you're saying is true—" "It is true," I stated firmly. "Then perhaps we've been mistaken in our assessment of your career." It wasn't quite an apology, but coming from Richard Harper, it was unprecedented. Uncle Robert, seeing the tide turning, attempted to salvage his position. "Well, if you've been so successful, you could have helped with the wedding costs. Family takes care of family. In fact, I personally helped finance several of your early projects." "No, you didn't," I cut him off. "That's a lie, Uncle Robert. You've never contributed a penny to my business. Just like you haven't paid the full balance for this wedding until I forced the issue this morning." His face reddened. "How dare you? I've always supported this family. By claiming connections you don't have and spending money you don't possess," I finished for him. "Your insurance business has been failing for years. You're 3 months behind on your mortgage. The only reason you booked Rosewood was because you thought you could leverage family connections for discounts." Patricia gasped. "How could you possibly know about our finances? I did due diligence on all clients with outstanding balances." It's standard business practice. By claiming connections you don't have and spending money you don't possess, I finished for him. Your insurance business has been failing for years. You're 3 months behind on your mortgage. The only reason you booked Rosewood was because you thought you could leverage family connections for discounts. Robert's bluster deflated. It's just temporary cash flow issues. Very common in business, not that any of you would understand. I understand perfectly, I interjected. Which is why I required full payment before allowing the wedding to proceed. You have no idea the pressure we're under, Patricia burst out. The expectations, the social obligations we had to give Amber the perfect wedding, had to maintain our standing. Even if it meant going into debt, lying to your daughter about what you could afford, I shook my head. That's not love, Aunt Patricia, that's vanity. Jackson knocked on the door, interrupting what was becoming an increasingly heated exchange. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the guests are seated. We should begin soon. He surveyed the tense scene, his gaze landing on Amber's distressed face. What's wrong? Amber looked from her parents to me, then back to Jackson. For a moment I glimpsed uncertainty beneath her perfect bridal exterior, perhaps the first authentic emotion I'd seen from her in years. My family isn't who I thought they were, she said quietly. Jackson took her hands. Neither is mine. That's why we're starting our own. His simple statement seemed to steady her. She nodded, then turned to me. I still don't like you very much, she said bluntly. But I respect what you've built, and I'm sorry we tried to exclude you. She glanced at her watch. Now can I please get married in this ridiculously beautiful venue you apparently own before my mascara completely gives up? It wasn't exactly warm reconciliation, but it was honest, perhaps the most honest interaction we'd had in years. The venue is ready when you are, I confirmed. And for what it's worth, I hope you have a wonderful wedding, Amber. As the family filed out to take their places for the ceremony, my mother lingered behind. I don't know how to process all this, she admitted. The daughter I thought needed guidance and correction has built something remarkable while I wasn't looking. I'm still the same person, Mom, I said. You just never saw me clearly. She nodded slowly. Jackson asked if you would sit at the family table. I think that would be appropriate. It wasn't an apology or a full acknowledgement, but it was a beginning. As my mother left to take her place for the ceremony, I realized that the family dynamics that had defined my life for so long were shifting not dramatically or completely, but perceptibly. Whether these changes would last beyond today remained to be seen. But for now, I would take my rightful place, not hidden away at table 21, not sequestered in my office, but acknowledged as both family member and accomplished professional. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The garden ceremony was picture perfect. Amber floated down the aisle in her designer gown while a string quartet played pachelbel. Jackson beamed as he watched her approach. Guests dabbed at tears, photographers captured every moment, and the historic grounds of Rosewood provided a backdrop that had evolved over centuries. I sat in the second row between my sister Brooke and cousin Ryan, still processing the family confrontation that had just occurred. My presence in the family section, rather than at the distant table 21, drew curious glances from extended relatives who had witnessed years of my marginalization at family events. You look like you're plotting a hostile takeover, Brooke whispered as the officiant began speaking. I couldn't help smiling. Just thinking. About revenge. About change, I corrected. Not sure I believe in it yet. She nodded slightly. For what it's worth, I'm trying to change. Starting with apologizing properly later when we're not watching Amber get married. The ceremony continued with traditional vows and heartfelt promises between Amber and Jackson. Whatever I thought of my cousin's treatment of me, her love for Jackson seemed genuine. As they were pronounced husband and wife, I found myself genuinely happy for them, not because they were family, but because two people had found each other despite the complications of family expectations. During the transition to the reception, Cameron approached me with updates on the event logistics. Everything was running smoothly, the staff performing with the excellence I'd built my reputation on. I thanked him and assured him I'd remain available if any issues arose. As guests moved toward cocktail hour, Jackson's father intercepted me. You must be Morgan, he said, extending his hand. Jackson told me you're the owner of this magnificent estate. I'd love to hear how you managed the historical renovation while adding modern amenities so seamlessly. Before I could respond, Uncle Robert appeared, placing a hand on my shoulder possessively. Morgan has always had an eye for design, he said smoothly. Our family has been in Boston real estate for generations, of course. I advised her on several key aspects of this project. The blatant lie, spoken right in front of me, demonstrated how deeply ingrained his patterns of behavior were. Rather than confront him directly, I simply smiled at Jackson's father. I'd be happy to give you a private tour later and discuss the renovation process. It was certainly a learning experience, especially since I didn't have family in real estate to guide me. She nodded slightly. For what it's worth, I'm trying to change. Starting with apologizing properly later when we're not watching Amber get married. I'd be happy to give you a private tour later and discuss the renovation process. It was certainly a learning experience, especially since I didn't have family in real estate to guide me. I never actually left, I clarified. I was just seated very far from the center. Robert's grip on my shoulder tightened briefly before he released me and moved away to greet other guests. Jackson's father chuckled. Brooke found me during a quiet moment between dinner and dancing. I promised you a proper apology, she said, two champagne flutes in hand. She offered me one and gestured toward a quiet alcove away from the music. Once seated, she took a deep breath. I've rehearsed this a dozen times, but it still sounds inadequate. I'm sorry, Morgan. Not just for today or recently, but for years of complicity. During the reception, family members approached me one by one. Some were genuinely curious about my business success, others clearly responding to the shifted dynamics rather than actual interest in my life. I answered questions politely, but without the desperate desire for approval that had once characterized my family interactions. In how the family treated you. I knew it was wrong, but it was easier to go along with it than to challenge the pattern. Every time Mom and Dad praised me for following their life plan, I knew it came at the cost of dismissing yours. She stared into her champagne. The truth is, I envied you. Complicity, I repeated. I had everything they wanted for me, she corrected. You had courage, freedom, the chance to define success on your own terms. She looked up. My marriage is failing, Morgan. You envied me. The idea seemed absurd given how she had been the family favorite. You had everything. No one does. I've maintained the perfect image because I don't know how to be anything else. Her voice trembled slightly. How did you do it? Walk away from their expectations. The vulnerability in my always perfect sister's question touched me deeply. It wasn't one big decision, it was thousands of small ones. Choosing myself a little more each time, even when it hurt, even when it was lonely. You envied me. The idea seemed absurd given how she had been the family favorite. You had everything. It's not about strength, I told her. It's about authenticity. Living your truth is actually easier in the long run than maintaining a lie. Exhausting sometimes, but cleaner. The admission stunned me. Brooke, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Our conversation was interrupted by my parents approaching. They looked uncomfortable but determined. I waited, expecting qualification or diminishment of my achievements. We owe you an apology, he continued, surprising me. We failed to recognize or support your ambitions, and we've treated you unfairly for years. My mother nodded. When you talked about business, we thought you were just playing at it. We couldn't imagine you building something so substantial without our guidance. That says more about your limitations than mine, I replied, not unkindly. Yes, my father acknowledged another surprise. It does. We had very fixed ideas about success, especially for our daughters. We'd like to understand more about your company, my mother added. If you're willing to tell us. The invitation to share my life, my actual life, not the version they had invented for me, was unprecedented. I studied their faces looking for signs of insincerity or strategic maneuvering, but saw only uncertainty and the beginning of respect. I'd like that, I said finally, but on one condition: you listen to understand, not to critique or reframe. They exchanged glances before my father nodded. We can try. It wasn't a wholehearted promise, but it was honest, and honesty was the foundation I needed for any relationship moving forward. Our conversation was again interrupted, this time by Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert. Unlike my parents, they showed no signs of genuine reflection. "We've been discussing the family business opportunities," Robert announced without preamble. "Now that we understand your position, we should align our business interests. The Harper name has significant weight in Boston. Together we could leverage considerable influence." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting a business partnership?" Patricia nodded eagerly. "Family, supporting family. As it should be. After years of dismissing my business acumen, you now want to benefit from it." Robert waved dismissively. "Water under the bridge. Family disagreements happen. What matters is moving forward together." His complete failure to acknowledge, let alone apologize for years of condescension and today's attempted manipulation confirmed my decision. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but Harper Estates will remain independently managed. My business relationships are based on mutual respect and shared values, not family obligation." Patricia's smile tightened. "That's rather selfish, Morgan. After all we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me, Aunt Patricia?" I asked quietly. "Besides, minimize my achievements, exclude me from family events, and spread rumors about my mental health." Her face flushed. "This is exactly why people find you difficult. Always holding grudges, always so sensitive." "Not sensitive," I corrected. "Just unwilling to pretend anymore. You haven't earned a business partnership with me, and your apologies aren't sincere. I'm happy to maintain family relationships on new, healthier terms, but I won't enter business arrangements based on manipulation." Robert opened his mouth to argue, but Amber's approach silenced him. "It's time for the father-daughter dance," she told him, either oblivious to or deliberately interrupting the tense conversation. As they moved away, I turned back to my parents and Brooke. "Some relationships may not change," I acknowledged. "And I'm okay with that. I don't need everyone's approval anymore." Jackson appeared handsome in his tuxedo, and surprisingly relaxed for a man in the middle of his wedding reception. "May I steal Morgan for a moment?" he asked my family. "Some of our guests are interested in Rosewood's history, and I thought the owner might be the best person to address their questions." As Jackson escorted me toward a group of his friends and business associates, he murmured, "You looked like you needed rescuing. Families can be exhausting even when they're trying to make amends." "Speaking from experience," I asked. He laughed. "Let's just say the Montgomerys have their own version of the Harper dynamics. Less about social status, more about business legacy, but equally complicated." "And yet you married into our family chaos." "I married Amber," he corrected. "The real Amber, not the version her parents created." We've had some very honest conversations about family expectations and how we want to define our own relationship. His perspective was refreshing, seeing past family performance to the authentic person beneath. It made me wonder if Amber had depths I'd never been allowed to see. The rest of the reception unfolded with the elegant precision Rosewood was known for. I moved between roles: family member, venue owner, newfound business connection, with increasing comfort. For the first time at a family event, I wasn't hiding aspects of myself or performing expected behaviors. The freedom was both exhilarating and occasionally awkward, as family members adjusted to the authentic Morgan rather than their imagined version. As the evening wound down, Amber sought me out, catching me as I reviewed final arrangements with the catering staff. "The wedding was perfect," she admitted, slightly less poised after hours of celebration. "Even with everything." "I'm glad," I said sincerely. "Your happiness was always the goal, despite our differences." She studied me with unexpected thoughtfulness. "You know, I used to think you were strange, choosing business over family. But watching you today, confident, successful, unapologetic, I get it now. You created something real while I was chasing approval." "We all make different choices," I said diplomatically. "Mine were safer," she acknowledged. "Yours were braver." She hesitated before adding, "Maybe we could have lunch sometime. Not as competitors for family attention, but as, I don't know, cousins who might actually have things to learn from each other." The offer seemed genuine, if awkward. "I'd like that." As she moved away to rejoin Jackson, I realized that the family dynamic had fundamentally shifted. Not through dramatic confrontation or complete reconciliation, but through small moments of authentic connection and the steady assertion of my worth. The patterns established over decades wouldn't disappear overnight. Some relationships, like those with Robert and Patricia, might never substantially improve. But others with Brooke, with my parents, perhaps even with Amber, had potential for growth based on truth rather than performance. As the last guests departed and the cleanup began, I stood in Rosewood's grand foyer, surrounded by the physical manifestation of my vision and hard work. The estate had stood for over a century, weathering changes in fortune and purpose while maintaining its essential character. Perhaps families weren't so different, capable of evolution without losing their core connections, able to accommodate change while honoring history. The Harper family would never be perfect, but tonight had shown it could be better. And for now, that was enough. The last dance of Amber and Jackson's wedding reception ended just after midnight. Guests departed with custom gift bags and glowing compliments about Rosewood's beauty. Staff moved efficiently through the venue, restoring order with practiced precision. I supervised the final cleanup, ensuring every detail met my exacting standards. Cameron joined me as I checked the grand ballroom one last time. Quite the successful event, he observed, both professionally and personally it seems. I smiled, thinking of the day's unexpected developments. Definitely memorable. Your family seemed surprised by your position here, he noted diplomatically. That's one word for it, I agreed. Years of carefully constructed family mythology dismantled in a single morning. Will things be different now, he asked. I considered the question seriously. Some things will. Others won't. Family patterns have powerful momentum. As we walked through the moonlit gardens, I reflected on the transformation that had occurred not just today, but over the years of building my business and my independence. The venue around us was the perfect metaphor, historically significant but repurposed for modern life, honoring its roots while embracing new possibilities. The next morning, I woke to several text messages from family members. My parents asked about visiting my office to see what you've built. Brooke suggested coffee to continue our conversation. Ryan sent congratulations on finally making the Harpers acknowledge your badassery. Even Amber sent a brief "thank you for everything." The venue was perfect. Most surprising was Jackson's message. Amber and I would like to host a small family brunch at our place when we return from our honeymoon. A fresh start with honest conversation. You're at the top of our guest list. 1 month after the wedding, I arrived at Jackson and Amber's Beacon Hill brownstone for the promised brunch. The newlyweds had just returned from their 3-week European honeymoon, looking relaxed and happy. Amber greeted me with an awkward but genuine hug, our first in years. Nice place, I commented, admiring the tasteful decor that managed to be elegant without the ostentatious display that characterized Patricia's home. Jackson and I did the decorating together, Amber said with unexpected pride. No designers or family input. The gathering was intentionally small, just my parents, Brooke and me, along with Jackson's parents and brother. Notably absent were Robert and Patricia, who had apparently declined the invitation after learning I would attend. They're still processing, Amber explained diplomatically when I inquired about her parents' absence. Dad especially, his pride took quite a hit. And his business reputation, Jackson added, less diplomatic than his wife. Apparently, several of his clients were at the wedding and overheard some of the financial discussions. They've since requested meetings to review their coverage. I felt momentary guilt, then reminded myself that Uncle Robert's business difficulties stemmed from his own mismanagement, not my revelations. The brunch conversation flowed more naturally than any family gathering I could remember. Without Robert and Patricia's careful social orchestration, people spoke honestly about their lives and interests. My father asked thoughtful questions about my business model. Brooke shared her plans to return to graduate school, a dream she'd abandoned to pursue the appropriate Harper daughter trajectory. Most surprising was Amber's transformation. Away from her mother's influence, she revealed an observant intelligence and subtle humor I'd never glimpsed before. When Jackson mentioned my restoration of Rosewood's historic elements, she offered insightful comments about architectural preservation that revealed genuine knowledge on the subject. I minored in art history, she explained, when she caught my surprised expression. Mom thought it would help me recognize valuable antiques when decorating my future home. She rolled her eyes slightly. I actually found it fascinating for its own sake. You never mentioned it, I noted. You never asked, she countered, echoing my own words from the wedding confrontation. We shared a moment of understanding. Both of us had hidden aspects of ourselves to fit family expectations, just in different ways. After brunch, my parents awkwardly invited me to their upcoming anniversary dinner. Nothing formal, my mother hastened to add. Just family. We thought maybe afterward you could tell us more about your current projects, my father added. If you'd be willing. Their efforts were clumsy but sincere, attempting to include me in family events while showing interest in my professional life. I accepted with cautious optimism. As weeks passed, family dynamics continued evolving in subtle ways. My mother called occasionally with genuine questions about my business rather than thinly veiled criticism. My father forwarded articles about commercial real estate development, tentatively engaging with my professional world. Brooke and I established a weekly coffee meeting where she shared her progress toward divorce and returning to school. She attended one of my company's charity events, visibly proud as I gave the keynote address. Robert and Patricia remained distant, occasionally sending stilted family update emails that carefully avoided mentioning my business success or their financial struggles. Their continued inability to acknowledge the changed family dynamic was predictable if disappointing. 3 months after the wedding, I hosted a major charity fundraiser at Rosewood, a cause I'd supported for years but had never connected to my family life. To my surprise, most of my family attended, including Amber and Jackson, my parents, Brooke and Ryan. Patricia sent regrets, citing a scheduling conflict. Robert didn't respond to the invitation. As I gave donors a tour of the historic property, highlighting the careful restoration work that honored the estate's heritage, I caught my mother watching me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pride unmixed with criticism or qualification. Later during the dinner, Jackson approached me. Amber told me something interesting yesterday, he said. She mentioned that growing up, she was always slightly jealous of you. Jealous of me? I couldn't hide my surprise. She had everything. She had everything that was given to her, he corrected. You created what you have. There's a fundamental difference between inheritance and achievement. His observation crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. My family's definition of success had always been based on conformity to expectations and social performance. My definition centered on creation, independence, and authenticity. After the fundraiser, I found myself alone in Rosewood's garden, contemplating the journey that had brought me here. The exclusion from Amber's wedding had been merely the final catalyst in a lifelong pattern, not the heart of the issue. The real story was about finding the courage to define success on my own terms, even when that meant standing alone. My family would never be perfect. Some relationships, like those with Robert and Patricia, might remain permanently distant. Others, like my connections with Brooke and my parents, were cautiously improving. New relationships, like my unexpected friendship with Jackson and the emerging understanding with Amber, offered different perspectives on family dynamics. Most importantly, I had built my own chosen family along the way. Colleagues like Cameron who respected my vision, business associates who valued my expertise, friends who appreciated me for exactly who I was, rather than who they thought I should be. As I looked up at Rosewood Estate, my greatest professional achievement to date, I recognized that the true transformation wasn't in my family's perception of me, but in my perception of myself. I no longer needed their validation to know my worth. The freedom in that realization was the greatest success of all. The exclusion from a family wedding had revealed not just that I owned the venue, but that I owned my narrative. Table 21 or head table, neither defined me. What defined me were the choices I'd made, the business I'd built, and the authentic life I continued to create every day. What's your experience with family expectations? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when family members tried to minimize your achievements? Drop a comment below sharing your story. I'd love to hear how you handled similar, situations. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to hear more real-life family drama stories, and share with anyone who might need a reminder that sometimes the family we choose is as important as the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth isn't determined by where others seat you at the table, but by your courage to build your own.